Today's episode, we talk to the one and only Lauren Howe. This episode is jam-packed full of different topics. We cover pageants, engineering, and even entertainment. Lauren has covered so many different things in her life, wearing many different beauty crowns, as well as education and even entertainment and interviewing others herself. And did I mention she's starting her own podcast? So I don't want to give too much away, so let's dive on in.
I don't know about you, but this past year especially, I've felt it before, but especially in 2020, to be like, I want to use my social media for something that's actually for good and for having important conversations that we have offline anyways, that all of us are craving more than ever, instead of just like this curated perfection thing that I don't know at what point we all got sucked into.
I agree with you 100%. And that you're so like, because I have you obviously on social media too. And I love your reels, like how like hilarious you are. I remember when we met, like even at Miss Universe Canada back in like 2013, I was like, I remember like, it's like beauty from the outside, but then I like got to know you. I remember we were sitting on the bus, you, Sierra and I was like kind of in between the two of you. And I was like, you guys are hilarious. Like you guys are like, I don't even think I could even talk. I was laughing so hard. Just like how hilarious you guys were and easygoing. It was like my first ever real pageant. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love the girls here. This is so much fun. Right. So
Yeah.
I think I totally agree with you in the sense of like 2020 really made us realize like we're having these meaningful conversations with people offline, but why can't we showcase this and show people really who we are, right? And stop the persona of what people really think we are.
Yeah, and that's, I feel, the downside of pageants, because I don't know if you felt this, but when I was competing for Miss Universe Canada, even the first time, but especially the second time, social media was so much more rampant, and it was like the peak of create a curated feed, and like realistically there's so many issues with Miss Universe Canada organization that like you have the same judges every single year, that there then creates this bias for the previous girls, that the judges start to look up and follow the girls on social media. So you're like, oh, I better post pictures that showcase that I'm a model, that I fit for IMG. And as a funny, not funny, I say funny because it's like self-deprecating humor, but like a realistic awakening that I had was, I was told, I can't share like what company and what role and what possibility, but it was like I had like basically in the bag a specific role in entertainment. And then at the last minute, there was another person that came up that was like submitted for the position internally. And I got vetoed from executives that had never met me before, because the first impression when they pulled up my social media that I controlled, it's my decision of what I put on there. And my decision was to be like, I need to showcase modeling pictures. I need to prove to people that I'm pretty with enough makeup and posing right lighting, that they ended up vetoing me for the position, because they're like, we will get for hiring someone who's a model.
Wow.
Where's the personality? Where's this? And like, I do that on my stories, but it was this like crazy moment. And I try to tell girls like going through the pageant, even girls who are trying to be social media influencers or models, I'm like, show so much other things of your life, because it's amazing how many opportunities you might have a door closed at that you didn't even know was a door closed, because you can't control other people's opinions of you.
100%.
And we shouldn't worry about opinions, but that's the reality of the world we live in. We need to be cognizant of the opinions and try to fight against it. So it's just like, you want to post and embrace your I like saying sensuality instead of sexuality.
Oh, I like that.
Right? Like you want to feel good and talk about, sorry, I'm totally hijacking. You haven't asked.
No, this is amazing. No, you keep going, girl. You know what you're doing.
But like, it's like, embrace your sensuality, where we shouldn't criticize women that like, even if you're working in a professional industry and you go on vacation and you can post a bikini picture and that's fine. That should be okay and allowed. But when you curate this feed that like, in particular, without saying specific names, even though it might be obvious, like when you become Miss Canada and you post lingerie pictures and you keep driving that messaging, and then I like, and even for the girls competing, because I noticed it set a precedent for the next girls going up where they're like, oh, I guess I need lingerie pictures to post online. And it's like, it is short-sighted, because you have people who will go look for other like career-based opportunities, and they'll look at your profile and be like, oh, okay, she's a lingerie model. And that could affect you subconsciously to that hiring manager of some kind. If you want to be a lingerie model and that's the specific vertical that you are full-time in, I'm not going to criticize anyone who is. That's your choice. But if you're trying to pursue multiple ambitions at the same time, it's like the age-old thing that we tell teenagers to be like, oh, careful what you post, careful not to be drinking or doing drugs or post dumb things. But we don't tell ourselves that once we hit our like mid-20s.
Well, and it's hard to find that professionalism, like, well, with both of us in careers too. It's hard to have that like model, pageant type or whatever sense, as well as like a professional, like, take me serious
Yeah.
feed, right? Like exactly what you're saying. Like, it's so hard to have that balance between the two, because also people already have like a preset notion of what they're going to think as soon as they meet you in person, whoever you are, right? And I think that's where people, as soon, I don't know about you, but I don't tell a lot of people about my pageant past. Obviously mine isn't like a huge part of me, unlike like yours where you went to like international level, but that's something I like keep to myself, because I feel like people right away are like, oh, are you like Honey Boo Boo? I'm like, no.
I literally say that exact disclaimer when it's like, oh, I did this thing, and like, or if it comes up in conversation that someone else brought up and I'm like, but I'm not Honey Boo Boo.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So on that note, tell us a little bit about like your past, in the sense of like you as like a child, what you like, what your whole atmosphere, in the sense of like, you were born and raised in Toronto, were you?
Yeah, I was actually.
Yeah, in Toronto. So like, tell just kind of who you were as like a younger child. Were you like tomboy, or were you more into like the?
Oh my God, yeah. Like if you told me as a kid I was going to do a pageant, like I probably would have backslapped you as a kid. But so I grew up like only child, single mom, super tomboy, also like camera in hand, because instead of being social with other kids, like, and by the way, do you have siblings? Are you only child?
I have an younger sister. I'm the oldest. Yeah.
Okay, so even as the oldest sibling, especially as an only child, at least speaking to my own experience, I don't know what it was like for you, but like when my mom took me places and there was like a kids club you could go do, like I was bored. I didn't get along with kids my age because she dropped me off at camp one year and it's actually kind of funny. She dropped me off at camp and she like distinctly, I don't even remember this. She told me this story. She came to pick me up and I was hanging out with the counselors and she's like, why did I pay money for you to just hang out with a whole bunch of older kids? Not like, this is the point of camp, meet some kids your age. But in that sense, I always like, I grew up a lot, it sounds kind of inflated ego, but like I was way beyond my years in age, that I actually always felt like I didn't fit in with my peers. And I think that's probably why I fell into things like sports or was a tomboy and like didn't understand how girl drama worked. So I in high school and middle school, I was definitely like a floater of like not being a part of one specific group, but you kind of like have friends in different circles. And if like drama popped up in one circle, I was like, I don't like this, and like move to the next one. But super, super tomboy. I was in love with, like just picking up my camera. I think there were things in entertainment I loved, but you're also good at sciences. So the natural progression of when you're going through school is, oh, okay, like I want to keep my options open. So I'm not going to fill it with these arts electives. I need to be taking the science ones to have prerequisites for university. And then I still loved science, don't get me wrong, but in hindsight, like I think there's so much value of keeping creative courses in your curriculum. And like this is a whole other rant I could go on of like our schools force us to make that decision so early on, instead of being able to keep a balance in your curriculum. Because by the time you have 3 electives and I need to be taking biochem physics, I have to drop art. Like that is just a non-negotiable for my schedule. But anyways, so fast forward, I did like a little bit of modeling as a kid that my mom put me in. You get too tall to be a kid's model and they're like, you're out. And you're like, okay, can I join your big girls modeling group? And they're like, you're too short, come back. And so you hit this like middle height where you're like, oh God, what do I do? And just kind of dropped everything relating to that when I said I'm going to university. So that's, I guess, like the younger years. And then coming into pageants though, I did it as a total joke in grade 12 of looking for scholarships. And my mom had sent me an article. She hates when I tell this story because she's like, you make me sound like that mom. And I'm like, no, she saw an article on CNN and it was like Kentucky teen pays off student loans by winning, it was like Miss America or like Miss Kentucky or something like that. Of course, it was Kentucky though, so the stereotype. But she was like, "Oh, hey, maybe this is a scholarship opportunity." So there's Miss Teen Canada. I entered as a joke, walked in, I saw everybody in like dress to the nines, heels, makeup, hair, and I'm like tomboy athletic self being like, I want to go to school to be a doctor. And I'm like, I do not belong. And I literally walked in, did a full 180 pivot, walked out. And then I remembered I had to pay like $800 for an entrance fee in high school. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're going to stay here for the weekend. We should just give this a try. But yeah, just like had fun with it. Ended up winning that, shockingly. I started walking off the stage when they went to announce for that specific like Ontario preliminaries. The way they did it is they said, here are like the 16 that are going to I'm sure you remember. Yeah. But like traditionally you think it's the last two holding hands, but in this format it was like, here are the 16 people going to nationals and your winner is. So like you might have 40 or 50 girls that were still standing in the back being like, oh, I didn't make it, and one girl out of those 40, 50 actually quote won. Yeah. I literally started walking off the stage because I was like, can I go home now? Like this is like
I did like the same thing because I had gotten the fitness award at prelims, like for Miss Ontario. So I'm like standing there because I kind of had an idea I was going to get it because my talent was hurdles on stage. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm like the only one that actually did an athletic thing because I do not dance. So that was about as crazy as I was going to get on stage. Yeah. And I remember I was like, okay, I got my thing. Did not expect me to go, like same thing, right? Holding hands at the end. That's what I thought. And then they're calling my name for the Miss Universe Canada to go to the next year. And I'm standing there, girls standing beside me, they're like, Nicole, they just called
you.
Like, for what? Like, for what? I was like completely checked out at that point. My face was hurting from smiling so much. I was like, okay, is this over? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. You're already like looking in the crowd for your friends and family being like, I'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. And honestly, that's something like, you brought up a great point where your talent, like there is no mandatory talent for the larger national competition, but like there's something I fell in love with, which is like exactly what this conversation, how it came about, like the community of women that are driven for the most part by this desire to make an impact in communities, of getting to know other women. And outside of sports, that supportive world was the first group of women, again, outside of sports, that I encountered, like large supportive group of women. You have your close friends growing up, but that's what made me fall in love with that world. And unfortunately, the stereotypes that come along with it. And even then, it's still like, I tell girls, you don't need to do a pageant to be challenged. You don't, at least until like, I'm going to hold in a strong belief. I didn't talk publicly about it for a really long time, but now I'm starting to a lot more. Like the way majority of pageants in Canada specifically, because it's a franchise model with different owners just owning the rights to hold it here, like this needs to be overhauled entirely in Canada in order to bring it to a 2020 place. Otherwise, pageants don't have a place in, I guess, 2021 now, in 2021 in Canada. Yeah. Because if girls want to be challenged on public speaking and, you know, living your healthiest wellness life, like there's so many organizations for women in the specific industries that you want to join. And I think that's the idea that I pull from pageants and try to tell people is like, yes, there are benefits that I love that have come with it. But if you are not a pageant person and don't believe in the way the current system is run, don't do it. But find an organization that has that group of women, because the older you get, the more you realize how valuable that is.
100%.
To have other women too. Like I never valued that in high school, where I'm like, oh, I'm friends with guys, it's fine. And then like, you're like, oh wait, I need more women in my life.
I completely agree with you, because I was the same. I was like always, especially in public school, like I was always with the guys. I like, all the girls were like, oh, like why are you playing flag football or tackle football? Like I was like the guy, basically. I don't think they looked at me as a girl, to be honest. But it was like in high school, I was the same. I was like, if there was drama or within specific groups, I was just friends with everyone. I was like, okay, like let's just keep it positive Patty here and let's just all be friends. But with the community, and I think also I look at one of my best friends, I stood in her wedding. I met her through pageants. And and I'm sure you can vouch the same, like there's connections we would have never made or even knew our ability if it wasn't it makes you step out of your comfort zone on so many different levels. And I totally agree with you, the way the format and everything is. I personally thought about doing it again because I've only competed at regional and Miss Universe Canada. And I thought about doing it again, but I'm like, to be honest, I feel like I got what I wanted out of it anyways.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And now we're at the age where it's like, okay, we're getting to that point. Like we're getting a little older to be competing at that
Which
level.
is so stupid. And even that alone makes me so angry, where it's like you were so young in life, but told that you're old in a vertical. And anyways.
Yeah. Like I was 18 when I competed at Miss Universe Canada. Like I remember them like, oh, what's your career path? I'm like, I just graduated high school. Like I wasn't even in university. Like I hadn't even gone to university or like college yet. And I think that's something where people need to know the realistic expectations with pageants, because I think that's the part where there's so much judge from the outside world because they don't understand it. And I don't even think sometimes the women in it understand what the heck. Right?
Exactly. Like the comparison when girls call me for advice of whether or not they should compete, whether it's a first time or a repeat, I always ask them, I'm like, look, if you were to spend the time and money that is required for Miss Universe Canada, that a lot of people don't realize, like it is nearly $3,000 to compete. That is a lot of money that even if you win, you do not see back. There is no cash prize. So if you were to take like, and then the follow-up question is, like there are other benefits obviously that come with having that specific title, but like realistically, when there are how many girls that compete and you're investing money, which, you know, you can always make back, but more importantly, the resource you can't get back, your time, plus other expenses, obviously. What is the goal that you want to get out of competing? Not winning, competing. Winning is like obviously a bonus. And the more you dig, like, you know, that age old, it's kind of funny, like it's what kids do, but it's like now what we do in business, where it's like, ask why, dig deeper, like 4 times, 5 times, 6 times of asking the why behind the motivation. And often you get to a place where it's like, well, I want to make an impact. Why? Well, because I want to have a platform to speak to a lot of young women about it. Okay, well, why? Because I'm passionate about climate change. Okay, well, why? Because this needs to change. And eventually you get to this route. And just one example of a girl is like, that was the path that she went on at explaining. And it's like, oh, she wants to start it wasn't a nonprofit. It was like a business, but relating to climate change. I'm like, if you took $3,000 and the time you're going to spend in a pageant to do this platform, like I guarantee you actually would probably make it further doing that on your own than you will wasting time to win a pageant or compete and then start from scratch to do that goal anyways.
Oh my gosh, you just hit the nail on the head on so many levels. Like that is exactly the reason why I didn't want to get back into either of having my businesses. Because like I was like, if I put that amount of money and time, like I remember prepping for like pretty much a year with fundraising and trying to get awareness and like your platforms, right? And I was like, wow, I could, even my dress, I'm like, I wear this dress for like 2 minutes on stage. Now what do I do with the $1,000 gown? When I could have bought inventory or did some type of campaign or commercial ad or something for my lines. And that's where I look at, I love your story in the sense of you went with a meaningful, like you went to try to get money for your education, which I think is like amazing that you were driven. You were like, I'm doing this. Like, this is what's important to me is my education. And share with like our audience too of why you did what you did, why you got into engineering and why that was like your passion.
Yeah. So, also it's funny, I don't know, this popped up in my head before I forget saying this, but just to the beginning of this conversation of us thinking about, you know, like sometimes needing to remove yourself from that title is I still fluctuate. I have months where I delete it from my bio on Instagram because I don't want that being a first impression. And then I have months where I bring it back because I'm like, no, it's something I'm like obviously still proud of. But I always say, I'm like, my goal in life is to be like a Gal Gadot. Which, funny enough, I'm like, I'm sure you've been told this before, like striking similarities to Gal Gadot.
Yeah.
But it's like, she happened to have done Miss Israel and was Miss Israel and went to Miss Universe, but like, you don't know her for that reason. It is an accessory check mark of like an accomplishment you did at some point in life. And that's why I say, if people want to do it, you do it by all means, but dig into the why and make it an accessory, because you will not be defined the rest of your life by this title.
Oh, 100%.
And some people think that they will. And that's the tricky part when you end up in that cycle. But so back to engineering, because that kind of like ties into that like anti-stereotype in both ends. And then you have like the engineering side being like, oh, I never would have expected you to be a pageant person. I'm like, well, I'm not. It's just something you did. It's one activity. And then engineering specifically, I chose because I am fickle as hell. I'm pretty sure I have ADD and I've never been tested. I did like online assessments. I'm like, oh, I must have it from this 3-minute quiz that tells me I do. Like, so really should probably see a doctor about it. But regardless, I constantly have this fear of closing doors and wanting to keep opportunities open, as so many people do. And engineering was an opportunity that actually in high school, I dropped physics in grade 12 because I'm like, oh, it's taking down my average a little bit. So let's pick up this like other elective in economics or something. And in June of grade 12, originally the plan is I wanted to be a biomedical, specifically go to biomedical science and then be a doctor to be a neurosurgeon. In June of grade 12, which for timelines, if everyone remembers, like you should have probably already picked what school you're going to at this point. I was like, oh, I don't want to be a doctor because it's surrounded. Turns out I realized I had shaky hands, so that's not a good combination.
No.
And two, I had this innate fear that kicked in where it's like, I'm going to be going to university with kids that have thought about being a doctor their whole life. And I'm still not sure what I want to do with the rest of my life. So the thought at that time, which in retrospect, I do see as a wrong train of thought, not wrong, but it's more eye-opening now. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be limited to the biomedical field. Because if I go to school for biomedical engineering and I don't end up doing, or biomedical, like medicine, period, and I don't end up being a doctor, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And like, obviously that's not the case. Like take whatever in school you're passionate about. If it is biomedical science, take that. Doesn't mean you got to stay in it. You're just getting a degree. Boom. But at that time, I was like, oh, if I do biomedical engineering and get an engineering degree, I'll keep my options open again to say if I want to write the MCAT or if I want to go to business, which I've always thought about, but just didn't want to get a business degree because I still loved sciences and I wanted something that with all due respect, and I say this totally tongue in cheek, but not, an engineering degree having like, it's so, it's sad that this was a train of thought, but I was like, oh, it's the closest thing to a professional designation from an undergraduate degree without needing to get a master's. You get the ring in Canada. And I'm like, this little thing can help break down the stereotypes if I choose to do anything in entertainment afterwards to somehow validate to other people, like, I am smart.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is not the right train of thought whatsoever to ever have, but it was something I thought at that time because I had won Miss Teen Ontario. I started getting like those like dumb blonde stereotypes even more. I'm like, no, I want to prove people wrong and do something that is what I've been told is incredibly difficult. And then you find out on your own it is. So that was the motivation around it, was to summarize that lengthy story, is to keep doors open, to prove credibility. And also in the back of my mind, like I'm not close with my father whatsoever. But one thing I did remember him telling me when I was younger is like, he's an electrical engineer turned entrepreneur. And that is something that always stuck in my mind where I'm like, I'd love to understand what engineers do and end up in business. So at least like the idea of growth and impacting other people's lives and bringing things to individuals, like that entrepreneurship thing excites me. But I want to have the skills and credibility when speaking with technical people, whether they're engineers or not, to know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, you got to kind of dig in the trenches at the beginning and then understand the whole business in itself to really be a good leader.
Yeah.
And talk, and like you said, when you're doing like a presentation or talking to people within the field, actually like with their tools in their hands and doing what they need to do, or even computer software and doing all these different things to make the whole project come together, you got to cover all the bases.
Yeah.
Right? So that's amazing. That's awesome.
There's a quote I heard recently too. Actually, a woman I was speaking with, and I'm like, a quote, it's online. I'm like, no, it was a conversation with an individual. But they brought up this interesting point that Canadians and Canadian leaders, we are actually more cross-disciplinary than, like, using in this example, the contrasting leadership versus like Canada and the US, and friends who have gone to US schools, it's like become a hyper expert in one specific vertical, versus a lot of Canadian leaders, it's you had to have experience in multiple verticals because we're smaller and have to be nimble and things like that, that actually lends to be extremely valuable down the road, but can feel what's the right word, can feel insecure in the moment, because you have people that advise you to be like, oh, pick a path. But
yeah,
it's exactly, it's like, it's fine if you want to be a hyper specialist because you're so passionate in something, that's okay. But if you want to be a generalist and be able to lead, it's okay to also get experience in different verticals. It might feel weird at the time, but like it will lend and serve you so well down the road. It is not a negative thing.
Oh, when I'm on calls with people, like we're franchising our one business, and I explain to them, I'm like, I'm still digging in the trenches. I'm still lashing at my spot. Well, physically not right now, but like I'm literally there still working 4 days a week with customers, like using our product, because I find it's also a great way to show like that you still have your hands involved. You're still being creative. You're still kind of seeing where the industry is going to go. You come up with all these ideas while you're still physically working too, being an innovator. Something that I saw in one of your interviews, that you were saying that engineering career, like going through the process of school and everything, was probably one of the most challenging things you've pursued like your entire life. Is that still-
Oh my God, is this from the Miss Universe interview?
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's such a backstory to this that anyways, continue with your question, because like it's honestly one of the like friggin' like biggest regrets of my life, and media training in the moment.
Okay, so we can touch on that obviously. So I like what was the kind of overall thing that you found was most challenging in from like the career point of engineering? Like, was it the schooling, or do you think it was becoming a woman in the career itself? Like what do you, in summary, what would you say?
So this is why I'm laughing, because like that interview is the death of me, and it kills me, because I'm the opposite person of ever being like a sob story because it was hard to do engineering. Like everything's hard in life. And the difference is like, so I was being interviewed there, and they like fire off a whole bunch of questions to you. It's actually an amazing production team. I really like them as individuals, but like it's the question that kept being asked, because I guess Miss Universe started taking this new spin to like have people's like overcoming challenges type of stories. They're like, what's your biggest challenge in life? What was the hardest thing you've been through? And I'm like, I'm not going to talk about that, because it's actually incredibly personal.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to have that shared on an international stage.
Yeah.
So like, I actually can't talk about that. It's like, okay, well just pick something. And I was like, I don't know. I guess like my engineering degree was really hard. And then that ended up being used as this like sob story challenge. And I'm like,
first question that comes up is like,
and I was like, guys, by no means. And then literally it's so funny, because like I have to only laugh at the comments in that video too. And they're like, oh, classic. Her hardest thing in life was going to a top university and having this degree. I'm like, oh my God, the age old, like you never know what someone else is going through in life. But like the internet trolls are rampant on that video, and it kills me.
Well, and I think with the questions, I like when I was doing Miss Universe Canada, they put you through like even the interview stage. I remember at regional level, it was a panel. And then when we went to Miss Universe Canada, it was individual. So I had no idea alone that was even happening. I feel like there was like miscommunication with that. But I remember going in, and these people were asking me questions, and I was like, how do you find a needle in a haystack? That was the one guy's question. And I was like, what is this like, I was like, is this a trick question? Like, I didn't even know how to answer some of them.
It's also funny because like those aren't I get it if you're doing a job interview, and like some job interviews they like throwing people off, but like you have an hour to a half hour for a job interview. You have 2 minutes with these judges, and like they want to spend their time asking me a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, I was like, and then I think and then I just made some like thing up that I was like, I don't know, this has a little bit of meaning about a needle in a haystack. I don't know.
It's, you know what though, but that's like the honestly, that was like my highlight of going through pageants more than anything, is like the on the spot pressure questions of being like, it was like honestly just job interview training is basically what it was. But
absolutely.
That interview of saying like the hardest thing engineering, I was like, no, actually like the hardest thing is like something I'll eventually talk about publicly, but it's just so personal that when they kept prying an answer, I was like, okay, I guess it's this. So I joked that like it was media training in action, where I tell people, I'm like, if you don't want something shared, just say no comment. I would not like to answer that question. Next.
You should have the right to do that. Like,
Exactly. But like you're kind of like, the guys are so like, that's why I keep saying like the guys are so great that I was just shooting the shit with them and having so much fun. And I was like, okay, I guess this is hard. And then you forget that I'm like, oh no, that's on camera and they can edit it. And so
yeah.
it's a eye opener for also when you see, you know, hypothetically like a celebrity that might have said like one little sentence wrong. And I'm always now being devil's advocate to be like, what's the whole conversation? What happened?
Yes, yes, 100%. I agree.
But that said, like hence I'm not, I'm really not the person to say like sob stories. I definitely think there are challenges for women in any quote male dominated field that exist. And it's important that we have conversations about it, but it's also like, I would rather be looking at like, okay, well, what are the solutions? What can we be doing? How do we focus on the problem and not make this such a split, like, oh, like, you know, you're not going to get anywhere by just fighting the other side and saying, you know, give us this, we need this. It's hard because of this. It's like, it's a work in progress that I think there are things systematically for a lot of different issues, as especially we've seen in this past year with Black Lives Matter, that have come to the surface, that have helped educate people to be like, this is actually what's difficult. And I'm actually just started reading a book called Brotopia by Emily Chang, and it talks about exactly this. So it's like the inherent bias for women in specifically Silicon Valley and in the tech sector. And this is actually, well, I don't have any valuable commentary to say, but even going through the first chapter and listening to it, it's like, yeah, there are little things that just may not make a woman feel comfortable. Or you think about how many programmers did not get credit early on, and not just programmers, like people in STEM, if they happen to be a woman, they may not have gotten as much credit for their accomplishments that stayed behind the scenes, hence Hidden Figures, the film.
Yes.
So there are issues by all means, but I think I was really fortunate that I was definitely like one of 5 white blonde women in our entire class. And it's funny because our first day, when it was like all the engineering classes together for the opening like speech and ceremony of like, welcome to the school, I went around the room and I counted. I was like, 1. Oh, look, there's 2. And my professors would call me out if I ever missed class. And I was like, how many people in this class? How many people? You're going to call me out. Plenty of other people missed and skipped here and there. And he's like, Lauren, have you seen yourself? You stand out in this crowd. I know when you skip class. And he just meant it in such like authentic way. But when you have at least, doesn't matter if they're a guy, girl, non-binary, whatever someone's background might be, it's all just about feeling inclusive, that I try to encourage. You know, it's great for like women to find other women, but like also guys in these programs, like help women feel included, because 100%. It can be really intimidating to approach a lot of guys, for a lot of people, and like ask for help. That's a point of pride for everybody, is to ask for help, let alone if you're a woman coming to a guy when you're feeling like I'm saying this in a gender way, and when you're the gender minority.
Yes, 100%. And I think too, I'm in the beauty industry, and I find like a lot of what I'm doing now is a lot to do with business, like the number game and things like that. My business is starting to revolve and change. I don't have a business degree. I have a 6-month aesthetic degree. So like my boyfriend went to business school, and I'm asking him these questions, and I'm like, even this Zoom call, trying to get this figured out. He's like, you don't know how to set this up. I'm like, okay, now you're making me feel bad for asking. Like, he's very supportive, but sometimes I'm like, I don't know these basic things. Thank goodness for Google and YouTube. But I think finding your like-minded people and surrounding yourself around those, that's why I was like, when I messaged you, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing, because it's going to show people, even whatever industry, whatever entrepreneurship, whatever university, high school, no matter your gender as well. I think as long as you find like-minded people and that community feel that you feel safe in, as well as that uplifting confidence that they can give you. And when you want to share something exciting with them too, they really are your cheerleaders. And I feel like everyone needs to find that. And I loved your story, like basically your childhood, in the sense of being a tomboy, kind of jumping group to group. I can totally relate to that. And I find even as an adult, as a female entrepreneur, I never really found my people until social media was really where I reached out to people. And I was following people that were so positive. And I love the outlook that you have of like, not the woe is me, like this was hard in my life. You're like, this is what I'm happy about. This is what I'm driven to do. And I think more people need to celebrate themselves in that way, and moving forward in a positive step.
It's the and then this again, it's very, very different for like, it's such a hard conversation to have because there are and to generalize, because there are absolutely, like, in so many different areas, if the system is stacked against you, it is worth having a conversation about. But you can always tell the difference when you're in a conversation with someone when they're just complaining.
Oh, yes.
And when it's solution driven. And I say that in the sense of like friends. And there's the two kind of things I love in terms of like one of the roster of life mottos that I have, which is find your tribe. Find your tribe. It's not easy. If the tribe doesn't exist, build it. Like, I don't have that core group of girls. Like going to U of T, it's not really this same community that my friends who have gone to like the Queens and the Western, where they have like a group of friends that came from the university together. Like U of T is such an international school that you make great friends, but then like you come together, you go to school, and then everyone scatters again. Or my close high school girlfriends scattered to schools in the United States. And like, if you don't have that tribe, build it. Start the group chat with different girls from different areas. Realize like you might actually become closer with someone who was the year below or year above you in school. And so find your tribe, and then surround yourself with just amazing people that make you better. Like the age-old quote, you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself by.
100%.
It's amazing how often you look around. Like I look at a certain chapter of my life, which happened to have been actually during my Miss Universe Canada time. And like the 5 people that mostly surrounded me in life, I look back on that, I'm like, oh, no wonder I was in a specific mental state.
Yeah.
No wonder. And it's just constantly rejigging that and trying to be there to support friends. But yeah, I'm kind of rambling on this point now, but
and being better, like each day bettering yourself. Like I have friends that'll come to me and complain, and I'm like, you can change this. Like you were saying, like there is a solution to every problem. It's like, the solution is just putting that work in to do something different about it and to grow it. And
yeah, it's also okay though to have like your close friends that you can confide in. I should say that, because like literally, I was going to share a personal story, but I'm like, I don't think they would like me sharing that. But the idea of like, actually, you know what? I will share it in this way. Like my boyfriend and I, we have great conversations where sometimes he's like, how do you want support? Like if you're having that bad day or thing that's going on in your life, what type of support do you need? Is it a listening ear, or is it problem solving?
Yes.
And so I think having that upfront communication with whether it's your partner, whether it's your friends, going into a conversation, like it's okay to vent. It's totally okay to vent at times. But I personally, like, I try. I'm not perfect, obviously, far from it. But set that disclaimer at the beginning of a conversation. Say like, I'm having a bad day. I just need to air it out a little bit, which in hindsight, it's like, it's always best to lay it out on a therapist instead of your friends. But regardless, those are expensive. But like, it's setting the expectation of what you need from the conversation you're going into. Is it a listening ear, or is it like, I'm having this problem and I have no clue what to do. I need your help.
And that can be on any, like a relationship or work relationship, your boss, like you can have those conversations, I think, with anyone, and setting the tone, like you said at the beginning, of like, this is where I need your support. And on that note, I know you're like crazy busy as well. So I want to just thank you so much for jumping on here with us. And I just think your story and how you explained your entire upbringing up to where you are now, and just your outlook on life to be general. Like, I just love your positive atmosphere you create online. And that's why I wanted to have you on here, because I feel like even from when I met you, like on that bus going to Miss Universe Canada, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm creating that community. And that's kind of what we touched on today. And I'm glad we got into that conversation, because I think more people need to know that's the whole reason some of us get into the pageants. I wasn't expecting to win. I didn't, to be honest, really want to win either. And that I just went because I was like, I'm gonna meet some new friends, see where this goes. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's how a lot of people end up in it.
Yeah.
Like and that's also okay for $3,000.
Yeah, exactly. Thank goodness I had gone and done all of my fundraising, because my parents thought I was crazy. They're like, you want to do what? They're like, we're not paying for this. And I was like, Yeah, I just graduated high school. I don't even have like a full-time job or anything. So like I just went to business owners and asked people for like to see if they would support
Yeah.
me, and an abundance of people being able to help support me. And I thank every single person still to that day, because I think that's what got me into the beauty industry was pageants. Like I was total tomboy too. I was like, oh, I can curl my hair. Oh, I got lash
Right.
extensions for the first time. And I was like, now I own a lash extension supply business. And I'm like, I would
Yeah.
have never done that if it wasn't for pageants. So I think we all get something different out of it. And yeah, it's what you take from it, I think, right?
Exactly. And like, exactly to that point, it's what you take from it. And then if you know what you want out of it at the beginning, whether, and I say it as in
Why too?
any group experience or competition, because you have people that love Model UN
Yes.
or
Yeah.
want to do startup pitch competitions and things like that. It's you know, you can find your tribe in different areas, and sometimes it's completely unexpected, but it's always I personally fell into it because of the whole say yes and see what happens. And that's
Absolutely.
been my motto for a very long time. It's how I ended up getting my job at the Leafs. I was not qualified whatsoever to apply to that role. Say yes and see what happens. But eventually, you do start to need to find that balance of yes, say yes and see what happens. But if you don't hone in on that focus, then life will start to make those. It's a balance that I'm still working on,
Yeah.
where it's riding the wave of opportunity, but knowing when to hop off to catch the next one before you hit a reef break.
I love that. That's so good. Quote by Lauren Howe. There you go.
Oh, by Lauren Howe, who's born and raised in Toronto, making surfer analogies somehow.
Yeah, there you go. You're in, as we can't travel or go anywhere right now.
Oh, don't even. I left a comment publicly on a few travel influencers who are like those girls being like, "This is your sign to go to Tulum with your best friends during a pandemic." And I was like, "Wait. Is this a parody? Oh, it's not? Okay."
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, so that's a sidebar. But yeah, I hope, were there any questions like we didn't cover since we're
To be honest, it was just like I feel like I always have like the opening question about how people got into kind of their industry or where they are now. And then we just kind of, to be honest, I have like questions for people who might be very like question.
right?
But a lot of people, I think everyone's just so passionate about what they talk about. And they usually have a message within their industry of why they're doing what they're doing or why they started their career path or their hobby, that type of thing. And I think we like covered it all. I think we had like some really good points people can take away from this. And I think even the connection from pageantry as well as career to entrepreneurship to community, I think we covered a lot. And
Yeah. So I guess like on that note though, the one thing I'll touch on is I guess like what I'm doing now.
yeah, let's go. Yeah, we can crop and cut and do whatever we need to do. So yeah. So
Especially with me having made the point to be like, some people get stuck in talking about pageants the whole time. And I was like, oh God, it's been like, what, 4 or 5 years since I did a pageant and I'm talking about it now? Oh God.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's the other thing of why I wanted to interview you, because I think what you're doing now is something you need to share with other people to see where your present day is.
Yeah, it's funny because half of my life, like many of us, like our digital persona is a sliver of who we are. And I've kind of taken a back seat of what I'm posting offline, especially in 2020, where all of us needed to like sit back, reflect, what are the things you love and care about. And following going to Miss Universe, I actually started working on a docu-series that is about life for women around the world. And it's a hilarious series of events for that series where like we were supposed to film the pilot. My friend and I were going to go to Ireland when they were in the middle of doing their vote for the 8th Amendment regarding abortion rights, and be on the ground there. I get appendicitis 3 weeks before leaving, and I'm like calling him while I'm getting wheeled into the like almost going into the operating room. And I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna go get my appendix out, but we're gonna still travel, right? He's like, I'm canceling our flights. No.
Reliability.
But that said, is like going through that process. And for me, the pageantry led to this additional step of, you know, asking that why? Why do I want to win Miss Universe? Why am I passionate about this? And for me, it was driven by this idea of storytelling and like, well, if I win each country that we go to, we should highlight the causes that representative cares about. And let's film it. Let's make it a series. And then that snowballed more when one of the judges sent me a direct message after the competition. And they were like, you were my #1 pick. And I love that idea. And you need to not let go of it. Like you need to like just because it's and this is hence like my advice when I tell people like it's just a title comes from the experience of losing, not winning. Because it's easy to be like, oh, it's just a title when you won, but like when you don't win the thing that you're going for, which is, you know, obviously all the girls who go to Miss Universe, when one girl walks away, it drove that idea of, okay, well, my why going into it is because I like storytelling that has an impact. And then step by step, that turned into this, me writing this 10-part docu-series, which we were supposed to film this year. And obviously global pandemic is not the time to be at the intersection of travel and entertainment. But it's like that ended up rejigging the idea of what I'm passionate about in storytelling. So it's making that transition from, yes, I'm a host for City TV and I do work on live television and I love that space. I love getting to know people and sharing their stories, which I'm going to be doing now through my own podcast, through the Howe podcast, and like the interviewing the fascinating people in my world and how they do things from you know, whether it's how to write a song from musicians, how to train for the Olympics, to how to be an ally, how to combat climate change from government perspective, from a corporation perspective. And so that's the interview vertical. And then the storytelling component is actually like I've been working on more skills behind the camera and kind of transitioning a little bit away from live television to more film and television, both acting and then being behind the camera, and using photography and filmmaking as creative expression to storytell instead of what we get used to with this.
Absolutely.
And social media and the presentability versus like, what do we want to share? Like I love the feeling you get when you watch something and you are motivated by it. And I want to build things that cause that feeling for others. So, and then ends up getting a full-time job for a marketing organization that kind of goes back to my roots of I'm the head of marketing and communications for C100, which is technology. Sorry, I'm so tired. I need another coffee right now. Not-for-profit member organization for Canadians in tech globally. So it be enough of like when the world feels like it falls apart, in this case for 2020, it was like, oh, cool. Like my entire career in documentary is totally shut down for God knows how long. Ended up bringing me to a place that was this intersection of Canadians, celebrating Canadians, entrepreneurship and engineering, and storytelling for those individuals. So
wow,
it's funny the way things always work out, even when we feel like we're in our lowest of lows. That yeah, this is kind of brought back to like the roots of storytelling, yet staying back in with like engineering and technology and how it's changing our world.
That's amazing. So it literally sums up everything from the base of why you got into what you do. Really, your story.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's like a full circle.
It's a weird revelation of a full circle that happened in obviously the, you know, what feels like a very dark year for many of us. So yeah, that's just the kind of personal story, but like I don't have the answer. I can't call myself a director or a producer yet, but at least, and that's what I'm trying to share with others, is like you don't have to know, but when you get that feeling in your core where you're like, this is something I'm excited by and want to explore, go explore it. No one's saying you have to do it forever. No one's saying you're gonna like fail or succeed, but sometimes talking about it publicly holds you accountable to saying, I should actually try this.
And it's okay out there, like putting it out to the universe. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. It's like this whole, we weren't even planning to do a podcast, to be 100% honest. We were like, oh, we're just gonna film these as like IGTVs, throw them on YouTube, try to get more awareness around like the brands of what other individuals are doing, entrepreneurs, their stories. Because I love same thing, storytelling. I feel like people need to hear where people come from to where they are now, so people can see it wasn't easy. Like people did go through this journey to get where they are because of social media. People go on social media, they're like, oh, they have it all put together. That probably just took them like a year to get that figured out. So that was kind of why we wanted to do what we're doing. And then I was talking to one of my assistants and I was like, we have the audio. Why aren't we throwing this on? I listen to podcasts nonstop.
1000%.
And I was like, it's three birds with one stone here. So why don't we just put it all on? And then it also gives people the opportunity to, because I'm the type of person, I like video. I like to listen to video, but sometimes I don't have time and I want to sit in my car and listen to the podcast. So they have both options. And I think I just thought like, okay, these other people are doing it. Why can't we do it? Right. And that's how it all just kind of came about. And I love that you're doing a podcast as well. I'm definitely going to be looking and subscribing to that one, because it's just like a whole new revolution of, I think people are realizing, even for our younger generation, I'm nervous for the younger generation of social media and TikTok and all these different things. But I'm also noticing the younger generation are going on with no makeup on. They're being more true to
Thank you. Gen Z inspires me like crazy for this reason. Like, I know people are like, oh my God, Gen Z making dancing videos on TikTok. I'm like, if you download TikTok and let the algorithm work for you, and I'm putting aside all the like controversy around data and security issues, so putting that aside for a moment, is during great example, during a lot of the protests this summer, and specifically surrounding Black Lives Matter, on Instagram, I felt I was seeing so much more hateful comments. And then I downloaded TikTok and I saw Gen Z making informative videos, talking about, like, having open conversations. And then to your point, instead of just like these dancing, like sexy videos, like whatever, there are some people that do it and some people that don't, but you have so many more people that love it because it's like, it's real, it's video, it's, this is what's going on in my life. Or, hey, TikTok, do your thing, help us out, this is the problem that we're going through, help us out, amplify this message.
100%. Yeah, I love it.
I'm so excited talking about this.
Oh, the TikTok world, like we have TikTok for our businesses and personal and stuff. And like the most ridiculous things that will take no time at all record. And I'm like, how did that get so many likes? The algorithm, it's on its own time.
It's so hard to quantify and sometimes explain. But I do have to hop on this other call.
Yeah, no problem.
Nicole, this is awesome.
This is unreal. Yeah.